The dust cloud rose behind the wagon train like a warning from God himself. And Owens knew in her bones that she could not keep up much longer, as her feet stumbled over the unforgiving California desert terrain. It was June of 1883, and the sun beat down on the 12 wagons making their way toward the silver mining town of Calico, a settlement that promised new beginnings for those brave enough to chase them. Emma's thick legs burned with every step, as she tried to maintain pace alongside the creaking wooden wheels, her dress clinging to her substantial frame with sweat that soaked through the cotton fabric. She had been walking for 3 hours now, ever since the wagon master had informed her family that their overloaded wagon could not support her weight along with all their worldly possessions. Her father had looked at her with those tired, defeated eyes that said more than any words could. Her mother had wept quietly, dabbing at her face with a handkerchief that was already damp from the oppressive heat. Her 2 younger brothers had remained silent, neither meeting her gaze. The decision had been made without discussion, because what choice did they have? The axle was cracking under the strain, and they were still 2 days from Calico. Emma would walk, or the whole family would be stranded in this God-forsaken stretch of desert. She had nodded, swallowed her pride, and climbed down from the wagon bed where she had been sitting among the furniture and supplies. That had been miles ago, and now her feet were blistering inside her worn boots, each step sending shooting pains up her calves. The other families in the wagon train had watched her with a mixture of pity and relief that it was not their problem. Only old Mrs. Henderson had offered her a sympathetic smile, but that did nothing to ease the burning humiliation that sat in Emma's chest like hot coals. The terrain grew rougher as they entered a stretch where the trail narrowed between 2 rocky outcroppings. Emma focused on putting one foot in front of the other, her breathing labored, her vision starting to blur at the edges. She reached for the side of the wagon to steady herself, but her hand missed, and suddenly she was stumbling, her ankle twisting on a rock she had not seen. She went down hard on her hands and knees, crying out as pain shot through her joints. The wagon did not stop. It kept rolling, the wheels turning with relentless momentum. Emma tried to push herself up, but her body would not cooperate, exhaustion and heat and pain overwhelming her senses. She opened her mouth to call out, but her voice came out as barely more than a whisper. "Wait," she managed, but the word was lost in the rumble of wheels and the calls of the wagon master urging the train forward. She watched through dust-filled eyes as her family's wagon continued ahead, growing smaller. Her father did not look back. Her mother did not call for them to stop. The other wagons followed in succession, and Emma realized with growing horror that they were leaving her behind. She tried again to stand, managed to get to her knees, but the world spun violently and she collapsed back into the dirt. This was how she would die, she thought distantly. Alone in the California desert, too heavy to be worth saving, too exhausted to save herself. The sun would bleach her bones white, and perhaps someday another wagon train would pass by and wonder briefly about the woman who had been left behind. The sound of hoofbeats made her lift her head weakly. Through the shimmering heat waves, she saw a horse and rider approaching, coming from the back of the wagon train. For a moment she thought it might be a mirage, a cruel trick her dying mind was playing on her. But the hoofbeats grew louder, more distinct, and then the rider was pulling up beside her, and she found herself looking up into the face of a man she had noticed earlier but never spoken to. He was young, perhaps 25, with sun-darkened skin and light brown hair that curled at the edges beneath his wide-brimmed hat. His eyes were a startling blue, the color of the sky just before sunset, and they looked at her now with concern rather than pity. He swung down from his horse in one fluid motion, kneeling beside her in the dirt without hesitation. "Easy now," he said, his voice low and steady. "Are you hurt badly?" Emma tried to speak, but her throat was too dry. She shook her head weakly, then nodded, then shook her head again, not even sure herself what she was trying to communicate. The man reached for the canteen at his belt, uncapped it, and held it to her lips. "Slow sips," he instructed. "Not too fast or you will make yourself sick." The water was warm but tasted like salvation. Emma drank carefully, feeling the liquid soothe her parched throat. When she had taken enough, the man capped the canteen and studied her with those steady blue eyes. "Can you stand if I help you?" he asked. "I do not think I can walk any more," Emma admitted, her voice hoarse and cracking with shame. "I am too heavy. The wagon, it could not support me. I have been walking for hours and I just cannot go any further." She waited for him to stand up, to make some excuse, to ride away and leave her to her fate. Instead, he glanced after the disappearing wagon train, then back at her, and something hardened in his expression. "That is about the most cowardly thing I have ever heard," he said quietly. "Leaving a woman behind in the desert to die, family or not, there is no excuse for it." Emma felt tears sting her eyes, though whether from relief or the simple kindness in his words she could not say. "You should go catch up with them," she managed. "There is no reason for you to be stuck out here with me." The man stood, but instead of mounting his horse, he held out his hand to her. "My name is Pierce Lawson, and I have been riding alone with this wagon train since Fort Mojave. I have no family among them, no particular reason to stay with them rather than strike out on my own. And I will be damned if I am going to leave a woman to die in the desert because some fools decided their furniture was worth more than a human life." Emma stared at his extended hand, hardly daring to believe what she was hearing. "I am Emma," she said finally. "Emma Owens. Well, Miss Owens, I propose we get you somewhere with shade and water, let you rest, and then we can decide what comes next. My horse is strong. She can carry us both if we take it slow." "I am too heavy," Emma protested weakly. "I will hurt your horse." Pierce looked at her steadily. "My horse has carried full-grown bucks I have hunted, plus all my gear over terrain worse than this. She is a Mustang mare with more strength in her than most people have in their entire bodies. Now, are you going to keep arguing, or are you going to let me help you?" Emma took his hand. His grip was warm and calloused, strong as he helped pull her to her feet. She swayed, but his other hand came to her elbow, steadying her. The world tilted dangerously, but Pierce held her upright, patient and solid as stone. "There we go," he said encouragingly. "Just lean on me. We are going to walk over to Daisy and I am going to help you mount." "Have you ridden before?" "Not often," Emma admitted. "And never a horse without a saddle made for ladies." "This will not be elegant," Pierce said with a slight smile, "but we are past worrying about elegance, I think. Survival first, propriety later." He led her to his horse, a beautiful dappled gray mare with intelligent dark eyes. The horse turned her head to regard Emma calmly, showing no signs of nervousness despite the stranger approaching. Pierce patted the mare's neck affectionately. "Daisy, this is Emma. We are going to help her, so I need you to be good and patient. Can you do that for me, girl?" The horse nickered softly, and Pierce turned back to Emma. "I am going to mount first, then pull you up behind me. It is going to take some effort, and it might not be comfortable, but once you are up, you can hold on to me and we will take it nice and slow." "All right," Emma nodded, too exhausted and grateful to feel embarrassed. Pierce swung into the saddle with the easy grace of someone who had spent most of his life on horseback, then positioned himself forward to make room. He extended his arm down to her. "On three," he said. "1, 2, 3." Emma grabbed his arm and tried to pull herself up, but her strength was depleted. Pierce did not give up. He shifted his grip, wrapped his hand around her wrist, and with his other hand grabbed the back of her dress at the shoulder. Between his pulling and her scrambling, she managed to get her foot in the stirrup. And then, with a final heave, she was sliding onto the horse's back behind the saddle. She nearly toppled off the other side, but Pierce caught her, steadying her until she was secure. "There," he said, slightly out of breath. "See, we managed it. Now put your arms around my waist and hold on. Do not worry about holding too tight. I would rather have you squeeze the breath out of me than have you fall off." Emma hesitated for only a moment before wrapping her arms around Pierce's torso. She could feel the solid warmth of him through his shirt, the steady rise and fall of his breathing. It was shockingly intimate, this closeness to a man she had just met, but there was nothing inappropriate about it. This was survival, pure and simple. Pierce clicked his tongue and gently urged Daisy forward. The mare started walking at an easy pace, and Emma felt the rhythm of the horse's movement, rocking her gently. For the first time in hours, her feet were not touching the ground, her legs were not screaming in protest, and someone was helping her instead of abandoning her. "There are some rocks about a mile east of here," Pierce said over his shoulder. "I scouted ahead earlier this morning. They will provide shade, and there is a small spring nearby. We will stop there, let you rest properly, tend to those blisters I am sure you have, and figure out our next move." "Why are you doing this?" Emma asked, her voice barely audible over the clop of Daisy's hooves. "You do not know me." "You do not owe me anything." Pierce was quiet for a moment before answering. "My mother died when I was 12, he said finally. "Cholera took her during our journey west from Missouri. My father, he was never the same after that, started drinking, gambling, getting into fights. By the time I was 16, he had gambled away everything we owned and drunk himself to death in a saloon in Santa Fe. I was alone, no family, no prospects, nothing but the clothes on my back and my father's horse." He paused, adjusting his hat against the sun. "A rancher named Tom Garrett found me trying to steal food from his smokehouse. Instead of turning me into the law, he gave me a job. Taught me how to work cattle, how to ride properly, how to be a man worth respecting. He did not have to do that. He could have let me starve or hang. But he chose kindness instead, and that kindness saved my life." Emma felt her throat tighten with emotion. "So you are paying it forward," she said softly. "Something like that," Pierce agreed. "Tom used to say that the measure of a person is not what they do when it is easy and convenient, but what they do when it costs them something. He died 3 years ago, left me a small sum of money and his horse. I have been working ranches and doing odd jobs ever since, trying to save up enough to buy some land of my own. Was heading to Calico to see about work in the silver mines. Heard they pay well for men willing to do hard labor. And now you are stuck with me instead," Emma said, guilt washing over her. "I am not stuck with anyone," Pierce corrected gently. "I made a choice. We both have free will here, Emma. I chose to turn around when I saw you fall. I chose to help you. And I will keep choosing that for as long as you need help. After that, well, we can figure it out as we go." They rode in silence after that, Emma too overwhelmed with gratitude and exhaustion to speak, Pierce guiding Daisy with confident hands. True to his word, they reached a cluster of large reddish rocks that rose from the desert floor like ancient sentinels. The shade they provided was immediate and blessed relief from the relentless sun. Pierce guided Daisy into the coolest spot, then carefully dismounted before helping Emma down. Her legs nearly gave out when her feet touched the ground, but Pierce caught her, supporting her weight until he could ease her down to sit with her back against the smooth rock face. Emma closed her eyes, feeling the coolness of the stone seep through her dress, soothing her overheated body. "Stay here," Pierce instructed. "I am going to get water from the spring and see about making a fire. We need to get some food in you." Emma wanted to argue that he should not go to so much trouble, but she was too tired. She simply nodded and watched as Pierce moved with practiced efficiency, first tending to Daisy, removing her saddle and letting her drink from his hat filled with water from the spring. Then he gathered dried brush and small sticks, building a fire with ease. From his saddlebags he produced jerky, hardtack, and a small pot which he filled with water from the spring. As the water heated over the fire, Pierce came and knelt beside Emma. "Let me see your feet," he said. Emma felt her face flush with embarrassment. "They are fine," she protested weakly. "They are not fine, and we both know it," Pierce said, his tone brooking no argument but remaining gentle. "I need to check for blisters and clean any wounds. If they get infected out here, you could lose a foot, and that is not something I am willing to risk. So please let me help." Reluctantly, Emma allowed him to remove her boots. The leather had rubbed raw spots on her heels and toes, and several blisters had formed and burst, leaving painful open sores. Pierce examined them with a healer's careful attention, then went to his saddlebags and returned with a clean cloth and a small tin. "This is going to sting," he warned, dampening the cloth with water from his canteen. He was right. Emma bit her lip as he cleaned the wounds, gentle but thorough. Then he opened the tin, revealing a pale salve that smelled of herbs. He applied it carefully to each blister and raw spot. "What is that?" Emma asked, curious despite her discomfort. "Something Tom's wife taught me to make," Pierce said, focused on his work. "Comfrey and calendula, mixed with beeswax and a bit of lavender oil. Good for healing wounds and preventing infection. I always keep some with me when I am traveling." He wrapped her feet carefully in strips of clean cloth from his supplies, his hands surprisingly gentle for someone who worked with cattle and horses. When he finished, he sat back and met her eyes. "You need to rest for at least a day, maybe two," he said. "Those feet need time to heal before you can walk any real distance. We have water here, I can hunt for fresh meat, and we are out of the worst of the heat. It is not the Occidental Hotel, but it will do." "The wagon train," Emma said, looking toward where it had disappeared. "My family." "We'll reach Calico without you," Pierce said bluntly. "And based on the fact that they did not even notice you had fallen, or did not care enough to stop, I am not sure they deserve to be called family right now." The words hurt because they were true. Emma had always known she was a burden to her parents, a daughter who had not turned out the way they had hoped. She was not pretty like the other girls, not dainty or graceful. She took up too much space, ate too much food, cost too much to clothe. Her mother had said as much, during those moments of frustration when the words slipped out. Her father had simply grown distant, disappointed in a daughter who would never attract a suitable husband. "I should not speak ill of them," Emma said softly, but even to her own ears, the defense sounded weak. Pierce added some dried meat and hardtack to the now boiling water, creating a simple but nourishing stew. "I am not saying you should hate them," he said, stirring the pot. "I am saying that what they did was wrong, and you do not owe them your defense. You almost died today, Emma. If I had not turned around, you would have died. That is not something you just forgive and forget." Emma had no response to that. She watched Pierce tend to the cooking, efficient and capable, and felt something unfamiliar stir in her chest. This man, this stranger, had shown her more kindness in one afternoon than her own family had shown her in months. He had risked his own safety and comfort to help her. He had touched her damaged feet without disgust or judgment. He had spoken to her like she mattered. When the stew was ready, Pierce poured it into a tin cup and brought it to her. "Careful, it is hot," he warned. "Sip it slowly." The stew was simple but delicious, warming her from the inside out. Emma ate slowly, savoring each bite, while Pierce fixed his own portion and sat across the fire from her. They ate in companionable silence as the sun began its descent toward the horizon, painting the desert in shades of orange and gold. "What were you planning to do in Calico?" Pierce asked eventually. Emma shrugged. "Whatever my father decided. Help my mother keep house, I suppose. Try to stay out of the way and not be too much of a burden." "That does not sound like much of a life," Pierce observed. "It is the life I have," Emma said, but the resignation in her voice made her feel hollow. Pierce studied her over the rim of his cup. "It does not have to be," he said quietly. "Calico is a boom town. There are opportunities there for people willing to work hard. You could find employment, make your own way." "Doing what?" Emma asked, unable to keep the bitterness from her voice. "Who is going to hire someone like me? I am fat, I am plain, and I have no particular skills beyond basic housekeeping." "You are not fat," Pierce said firmly. "You are a woman with a larger build. There is a difference. And as for skills, everyone has to start somewhere. There are boarding houses that need cooks and cleaners, laundries that need workers, shops that need help. You can read and write, I assume?" "Yes," Emma said, surprised by the question. "My mother insisted on education, even if she thought I was wasting it." "Then you are ahead of half the people in any mining town," Pierce said. "Emma, I am not saying it will be easy, but I am saying it is possible. You could build a life of your own, answer to no one but yourself, make your own choices." The idea was terrifying and thrilling in equal measure. Emma had never considered such a thing. Women did not just strike out on their own, especially not women like her. But then again, women were not supposed to be left to die in the desert either, and that had happened. Maybe the old rules did not apply out here in the wild, harsh landscape of the California desert. "I would not know where to start," she admitted. "Well, first we get you healed," Pierce said practically. "Then we make our way to Calico. I will help you find a place to stay, help you find work if you want it. After that, the choices are yours to make." "Why would you do all that?" Emma asked, genuinely puzzled. "You have already done so much." Pierce looked at her for a long moment, and in the fading light, his blue eyes seemed to hold depth she had not noticed before. "Because you deserve better than what you have been given," he said simply. "And because I believe people should help each other when they can. It is what makes us human instead of just animals fighting over scraps." Emma felt tears prick at her eyes again, but this time she did not try to hide them. She let them fall, silent tracks down her dusty cheeks, mourning the family that had abandoned her and celebrating the stranger who had saved her life. Pierce did not try to comfort her or tell her not to cry. He simply let her have her moment of grief and relief, tending to the fire and giving her the space she needed. As darkness fell over the desert, the temperature dropped rapidly, and Emma found herself shivering despite the fire. Pierce noticed immediately and retrieved a wool blanket from his supplies, draping it over her shoulders. "We will keep the fire going through the night," he said. "I will take first watch, make sure nothing comes sniffing around. You try to get some sleep." "You need rest too," Emma protested. "I will sleep later," Pierce assured her. "I am used to keeping watch. Comes from years of working cattle drives. You cannot rest properly if you are worried about coyotes or worse coming out of the dark, so let me worry about that. Your job is to heal." Emma wanted to argue, but exhaustion was pulling at her like a physical weight. She wrapped herself in the blanket, positioned herself as comfortably as she could against the rock, and let her eyes drift closed. The last thing she saw before sleep claimed her was Pierce sitting by the fire, his rifle resting across his knees, watching over her like a guardian in the wilderness. She woke several times during the night, each time finding Pierce alert and watchful, adding wood to the fire or checking on Daisy. Once she woke to find him looking at her, and in the firelight his expression was soft, almost tender. When he noticed her eyes open, he smiled slightly. "Just checking that you are still breathing," he said softly. "Go back to sleep." She did, feeling safer than she had in longer than she could remember. The next day passed in a haze of rest and recovery. Pierce proved to be an excellent caretaker, changing the dressings on her feet, making sure she drank plenty of water, and even managing to catch 2 desert rabbits that he roasted over the fire for their dinner. Emma tried to be useful, but Pierce gently insisted she stay off her feet as much as possible. "There will be plenty of time for you to help later," he said. "Right now, your job is to heal. Let me take care of things." It was strange being taken care of. Emma could not remember the last time someone had tended to her needs without complaint or resentment. Pierce did it all with an easy competence that spoke of someone comfortable being alone, but also with a kindness that suggested he genuinely wanted to help. They talked as the day wore on, sharing stories of their lives. Emma told him about growing up in Ohio, about her father's failed farming venture and the decision to head west in search of silver riches. She told him about her brothers, both of them thin and quick like their father, neither of them ever understanding why Emma was not the same. She told him about the way people looked at her, the comments and cruel jokes, the slow erosion of her self-worth. Pierce listened without judgment, his face showing anger at the cruelty she described but never pity. When it was his turn, he told her more about his life after his father's death, about working the Garrett Ranch and learning what it meant to be a man of integrity. He told her about the places he had been, the things he had seen, the dream he carried of owning his own small ranch someday. "Nothing fancy," he said, gazing into the fire. "Just enough land for some cattle, maybe some horses. A house I built with my own hands. A place that is mine, that no one can take away or gamble off or lose to drink." "It sounds wonderful," Emma said honestly. "I hope you get it." "Maybe I will," Pierce said, glancing at her with a small smile. "Been working toward it for 8 years now. Got a good amount saved. Just need a bit more, enough to buy the land and get started. That is why I was heading to Calico. Silver mine work pays well if you are willing to risk your lungs for it." "Is it worth it?" Emma asked. "The risk, I mean," Pierce shrugged. "Depends on what you are working toward. For me, yes. A few years of hard work in exchange for the life I want. That is a trade I am willing to make." Emma admired that certainty, that clear vision of what he wanted and his determination to achieve it. She had never had such clarity. Her life had always been about trying to be less, to take up less space, to want less, to be less of a disappointment. The idea of actually pursuing something she wanted had never even occurred to her. "What do you want, Emma?" Pierce asked, as if reading her thoughts. "If you could have anything, build any kind of life, what would it be?" No one had ever asked her that before. Emma sat with the question, really considering it. What did she want? "I want to matter," she said finally, her voice soft but certain. "I want to wake up in the morning and know that my existence has purpose beyond being a burden to others. I want to do work that means something, even if it is small. I want to be seen as a person, not just a body that takes up too much space. I want just once to have someone look at me the way men look at pretty women, like I am something wonderful and worth treasuring." She stopped, embarrassed by her own honesty. But when she dared to look at Pierce, he was not laughing or looking uncomfortable. He was regarding her with serious attention, like what she had said mattered to him. "Those are good wants," he said, "and they are not impossible. You matter, Emma. You mattered enough for me to turn around. And as for the rest, well, I think you are going to surprise yourself with what you are capable of once you get the chance to try." The conversation moved on to lighter topics after that, but Emma could not forget the way Pierce had looked at her when she spoke of her wants, like he truly heard her and believed she deserved to have them fulfilled. By the morning of the second day, Emma's feet had improved enough that she could walk short distances without wincing. Pierce checked the wounds carefully, applying more salve and fresh bandages. "We can make for Calico today if you feel up to it," he said. "It will be a slow ride, and we will need to stop frequently, but we should be able to reach the town by nightfall. Or we can wait another day if you need more time." Emma considered. Part of her wanted to stay in this little camp, in this bubble where it was just her and Pierce and the desert, where she felt safe and cared for. But she knew that was not realistic. They needed to move forward toward whatever future awaited them in Calico. "I can make it," she said. "Let us go today." Pierce nodded and began breaking down their small camp, packing his supplies with practiced efficiency. Emma helped where she could, rolling the blanket and gathering the cups they had used. When everything was secured on Daisy's saddle, Pierce helped Emma mount, then swung up in front of her. She wrapped her arms around his waist, and this time the gesture felt natural, comfortable. They rode northeast, following a trail that Pierce seemed to know well. The landscape shifted gradually, the flat desert giving way to rocky hills dotted with Joshua trees and scrub brush. Emma could see the scars of human activity, old mining claims and abandoned camps, signs that they were approaching civilization. They stopped twice to rest and water the horse, and each time Pierce checked on Emma's feet and made sure she drank and ate. His attentiveness never wavered, and Emma found herself watching him when he was not looking, noticing the way the sun caught in his hair, the strength in his hands, the calm competence in everything he did. She was developing feelings for this man, she realized, with a mix of excitement and fear. It was foolish, she told herself. He was being kind because he was a good person, not because he had any romantic interest in her. She was still the same heavy, plain woman she had always been. Men like Pierce did not fall for women like her. But she could not help the way her heart beat faster when he smiled at her, or the way she felt warm when his hand steadied her arm, or the way she hung on every word when he spoke. It was foolish and hopeless, but it was also the first time she had ever felt this way about anyone, and she could not bring herself to regret it even if it led nowhere. They crested a final hill as the sun began to sink toward the western horizon, and there, spread out in the valley below, was Calico. The mining town was larger than Emma had expected, a sprawl of wooden buildings and tents clinging to the hillsides like barnacles on a ship's hull. Smoke rose from dozens of chimneys, and even from a distance she could hear the sounds of industry, the stamp mills crushing ore, the shouts of men, the general cacophony of a boom town in full swing. "There it is," Pierce said. "Not much to look at, but it is civilization at least. There is a hotel, a few boarding houses, saloons, shops, even a church last I heard. We will find you a safe place to stay, somewhere respectable." They rode down into the town as dusk settled over the desert. The streets were busy despite the hour, miners coming off their shifts, merchants closing their shops, women of questionable reputation calling to men from doorways and windows. Emma stared at it all, overwhelmed by the noise and activity after days of desert silence. Pierce guided Daisy to a 2-story wooden building with a painted sign that read, "Henderson House, respectable lodging for ladies and families." He dismounted and helped Emma down, keeping a supportive hand under her elbow as her feet touched the ground. "Wait here," he said. "I will see about a room." He disappeared inside, and Emma stood on the wooden sidewalk, acutely aware of her disheveled appearance, her dirty dress, her bandaged feet visible beneath her hem. A few people glanced at her curiously as they passed, but no one stopped or stared. In a town like this, everyone was a stranger, and one more dusty traveler was hardly worth notice. Pierce emerged a few minutes later with a woman in her 50s, gray-haired and solid-looking, with sharp eyes that assessed Emma in one quick glance. "This is Mrs. Cooper," Pierce said. "She runs the boarding house. She has a room available." $10 a week, meals included," Mrs. Cooper said briskly. "No men in the rooms, no drinking, no loud behavior. Wash day is Monday. You keep your room clean and cause no trouble, we will get along fine." "I do not have $10, Emma said quietly, humiliation washing over her. She had no money at all, she realized. Everything had been with her family and they were gone. Before Mrs. Cooper could respond, Pierce said, "I will cover her first 2 weeks. After that she will be working and can pay her own way." "Pierce, no," Emma protested. "You cannot afford that. You are saving for your land." "I can spare $20, Pierce said firmly. "It gives you time to find work without being desperate. Consider it a loan if it makes you feel better. You can pay me back when you are settled." Mrs. Cooper looked between them, her expression softening slightly. "You are a good man, Mr. Lawson," she said. "All right, 2 weeks paid in advance. Miss Owens, you come with me and I will show you to your room. You look like you could use a hot bath and a proper meal." Emma wanted to argue more, but Pierce gave her a look that stopped the words in her throat. "Let me do this," he said quietly. "Please." She nodded, unable to speak past the lump in her throat. Pierce paid Mrs. Cooper from a leather pouch at his belt, counting out the bills carefully. Then he turned to Emma. "I need to see about stabling Daisy and finding my own lodging," he said. "But I will come by tomorrow morning, check on you, help you start looking for work if you want. Is that all right?" "You have already done so much," Emma said, her voice shaking. "I do not know how to thank you." Pierce smiled, and it transformed his face, making him look younger and startlingly handsome. "You do not need to thank me. Just take care of yourself, all right? I will see you in the morning." He tipped his hat to both women, then led Daisy away down the street. Emma watched him go, her heart in her throat, until Mrs. Cooper cleared her throat pointedly. "Come along, dear," she said, her tone gentler than before. "Let us get you settled." The room was small but clean, with a narrow bed, a washstand, and a single window that looked out over the street. Mrs. Cooper showed her where the bathing room was, promised to have hot water brought up, and told her dinner would be served in an hour. "That young man cares for you, Mrs. Cooper said as she turned to leave. "I have been running this house for 10 years, and I have seen a lot of people come through. I can tell when a man's feelings are more than just Christian charity." Emma shook her head. "He is just a kind person. He saved my life in the desert. He feels responsible for me, that is all." Mrs. Cooper gave her a knowing look. "If you say so, dear. But I saw the way he looked at you when you were not watching. That was not the look of a man doing his duty. That was the look of a man who has found something precious." She left before Emma could respond, closing the door softly behind her. Emma sat on the edge of the bed, Mrs. Cooper's words echoing in her mind. Could it be possible? Could Pierce truly see her as something more than a charity case? She did not let herself hope too much. Hope was dangerous. But as she bathed in the hot water that a young Mexican girl brought up in buckets, washing away the desert dust and grime, she could not help but replay every interaction she had had with Pierce, searching for signs that Mrs. Cooper might be right. The next morning, Emma woke to sunlight streaming through the window and the sounds of the town coming to life below. She dressed carefully in her cleanest dress, brushed her hair until it shone, and went down to the dining room where Mrs. Cooper served breakfast to her lodgers. There were 4 other women staying at the house, all of them either working in town or recently arrived seeking employment. Emma had just finished eating when there was a knock at the front door, and a moment later, Mrs. Cooper showed Pierce into the dining room. He had clearly cleaned up as well, his face freshly shaved, his shirt clean, his hair still damp. He smiled when he saw Emma, and she felt her heart do that now familiar flutter. "Good morning," he said. "How are your feet?" "Much better," Emma said honestly. "I can walk without pain now, though I should probably change the bandages." "I brought more salve," Pierce said, holding up a small package. "Figured you might need it. Are you ready to see about finding work, or do you need more time to rest?" "I am ready," Emma said, standing. She was nervous, but also excited. This was the first day of her new life, the life she was going to build for herself. They spent the morning going from business to business. The first few were discouraging. A laundry owner took one look at Emma and said he needed someone who could work quickly, his tone implying she did not fit that description. A shopkeeper said he had no openings. A restaurant owner said he was looking for someone with experience. Emma felt her confidence flagging with each rejection, but Pierce remained steadfast beside her, encouraging her to keep trying. Finally, they entered a bakery near the edge of town, drawn by the smell of fresh bread. The proprietor was a woman in her 40s, flour dusting her sturdy frame, sweat beading on her forehead despite the early hour. "Help you?" she asked, barely looking up from the dough she was kneading. "My name is Emma Owens," Emma said, trying to sound confident. "I am looking for work. I can clean, do basic cooking, and I am a hard worker." The woman looked up now, assessing Emma with a practiced eye. "You ever worked in a bakery before?" "No, madam," Emma admitted, "but I am willing to learn." "Can you lift 50 pounds?" Emma hesitated, then nodded. She was strong, even if she was not fast. The woman wiped her hands on her apron and came around the counter. "Name is Ruth Brennan. I run this place alone since my husband died last year. I am working myself to death trying to keep up with demand. I need someone who can help with the heavy work, cleaning, maybe eventually some of the baking if you show aptitude. The hours are long, the work is hard, and it is hot as hell in here come afternoon. I can pay $8 a week, plus you can take home whatever does not sell at the end of the day." Interested? $8 a week. It was not a lot, but it was a start. Emma felt hope bloom in her chest. "Yes, madam, very interested." Ruth studied her for a moment longer, then nodded. "All right. Start tomorrow, 4 in the morning. Do not be late. I need someone I can count on." "I will be here," Emma promised. They shook hands, Ruth's grip strong and businesslike, and then Emma and Pierce were back out on the street. Emma felt like she could hardly breathe, excitement and relief flooding through her. "I got a job," she said, turning to Pierce with a huge smile. "I actually got a job." Pierce grinned back at her. "I told you that you would. This is just the beginning, Emma. You are going to do great." Without thinking, Emma threw her arms around him in a hug. She realized what she was doing a second later and started to pull back, embarrassed. But Pierce's arms came around her, returning the embrace. He held her for a moment, warm and solid, and Emma felt safe in a way she had never experienced before. When they finally separated, both of them were blushing slightly. Pierce cleared his throat. "I should let you get back and rest before your first day tomorrow. 4 in the morning is going to come early." "What about you?" Emma asked. "Are you going to look for work in the mines?" Pierce nodded. "Going to talk to the foreman at the Odessa mine this afternoon. They are always looking for men willing to work hard. I will probably start in the next few days." They walked back to the boarding house together, neither of them in a hurry despite having other things to do. When they reached the front steps, Pierce turned to her. "Can I come by sometimes?" he asked. "Check on how you are doing, maybe take you to dinner if you have a free evening." Emma's heart soared. I would like that very much. Good, Pierce said, smiling that smile that made her knees weak. Then I will see you soon. He tipped his hat and walked away, and Emma stood on the steps watching him until he disappeared around a corner. She touched her fingers to her lips, feeling like she was living in a dream, terrified she would wake up. The weeks that followed fell into a rhythm. Emma rose before dawn each day and walked through the dark streets to the bakery, where Ruth taught her the trade with brisk efficiency. The work was indeed hard, the hours long and the heat of the ovens brutal. But Emma found she loved it. She loved the smell of baking bread, the satisfaction of creating something tangible with her own hands, the way Ruth nodded approvingly when Emma mastered a new skill. Ruth was demanding but fair, never commenting on Emma's size, except to note approvingly that she was strong enough to handle the heavy bags of flour and the large mixing bowls. Within 2 weeks, Ruth was teaching her the basics of bread making, and within a month, Emma was trusted to handle some of the baking herself when Ruth needed to make deliveries or deal with suppliers. Pierce came by whenever his schedule allowed, which was usually twice a week. He had indeed found work at the Obese mine, grueling labor deep underground that left him exhausted and covered in dust. But he always cleaned up before coming to see Emma, and he always had that smile ready when she opened the door. They began taking walks together in the evenings when both were free, exploring the hills around Calico, talking about everything and nothing. Pierce told her about the mine, about the men he worked with, about the small progress he was making toward his dream of owning land. Emma told him about the bakery, about Ruth's gruff kindness, about the satisfaction of earning her own money and supporting herself. She paid Pierce back the $20 within 2 months, counting it out carefully from her saved wages. He tried to refuse it, but she insisted. "You gave me the chance to build this life," she said. "The least I can do is repay what I owed." "You never owed me anything," Pierce said softly, "but if it matters to you, I will take it." After that, their relationship shifted somehow, became more equal. They were not rescuer and rescued anymore. They were friends, genuine friends who enjoyed each other's company and looked forward to their time together. Except Emma was lying to herself if she called it just friendship. She was falling in love with Pierce Lawson, had been falling since that first moment in the desert when he had looked at her with concern instead of disgust. She loved the way he listened when she talked, really listened like her words mattered. She loved the way he laughed, full and genuine, at her jokes. She loved the way he treated her like an equal, never condescending, never pitying. But she kept her feelings locked tight in her chest, terrified of ruining what they had by confessing to emotions he could not possibly return. Pierce was handsome and kind and hardworking. He could have his pick of women. Why would he choose her? 4 months after arriving in Calico, Emma's life had transformed completely. She was one of Ruth's most trusted employees, handling much of the baking while Ruth focused on the business side. She had made friends among the other lodgers at Mrs. Cooper's boarding house. She had saved nearly $30, money that was entirely her own. She felt strong, capable, purposeful. She was also desperately in love and convinced it was hopeless. It was early October when things finally came to a head. Pierce came by on a Sunday, their usual day for longer walks, and suggested they hike up to the old abandoned mine on the north side of town. The air had finally cooled enough to make such exertion pleasant, and Emma agreed eagerly. They climbed in companionable silence, Pierce occasionally offering his hand when the terrain grew rough. Emma took it without hesitation now, used to these small touches between them. At the top, they found a flat rock that offered a stunning view of the valley below, the town of Calico spread out like a child's toy set. the desert stretching endlessly in all directions. They sat side by side, catching their breath, passing Pierce's canteen back and forth. The silence was comfortable, the kind that only exists between people who have spent enough time together that words are not always necessary. "Emma," Pierce said finally, his voice uncharacteristically hesitant. "Can I ask you something?" "Of course," Emma said, turning to look at him. Pierce was staring out at the view, not meeting her eyes, which was unusual for him. "Do you ever think about the future, about what you want long-term, not just in terms of work?" Emma's heart started beating faster. "Sometimes," she said carefully. "Why do you ask?" Pierce took a deep breath. "I have been saving money for 8 years to buy land for a ranch. I have always pictured doing it alone because I never met anyone I could imagine building that life with. But lately, the past few months especially, that picture has changed. Now when I think about that ranch, about that house I want to build, I do not see myself alone anymore. I see you there with me." Emma forgot how to breathe. She stared at Pierce, sure she must have misunderstood, but he finally turned to look at her, and his eyes were blazing with an intensity she had never seen before. "I am in love with you, Emma," he said, his voice steady now, certain. "I think I have been since that day in the desert when you let me help you despite your pride telling you to refuse. I love your strength, your kindness, your laugh, the way you throw yourself into everything you do with complete determination. I love the way you see the world, the way you have built this new life for yourself from nothing but sheer will. I love you, and I want to build a future with you if you will have me." Emma felt tears streaming down her face. "I am not beautiful," she managed to say. "I am not delicate or graceful. I am fat and plain, and I do not understand why you would want me when you could have anyone." Pierce reached out and cupped her face in his hands, his thumbs gently wiping away her tears. "You are beautiful," he said fiercely. "You are beautiful to me in ways that have nothing to do with what society says a woman should look like. You are strong and real and genuine. You do not pretend to be something you are not. When you smile, it lights up your entire face. When you laugh, I want to spend my life finding ways to make you laugh again. You are exactly what I want, Emma. You are everything I want." "I love you too," Emma whispered, barely able to get the words out past the emotion clogging her throat. "I have loved you for months, but I was too afraid to say anything. I thought it was impossible that you could feel the same way." Pierce smiled, and then he was kissing her, soft and gentle and perfect. Emma kissed him back, pouring all her love and hope and joy into that kiss, finally allowing herself to believe that this was real, that this man truly wanted her, loved her, chose her. When they finally pulled apart, both of them were breathing hard, both smiling like fools. Pierce rested his forehead against hers. "Marry me," he said. "I know it is fast, I know we should probably wait, but I am sure, Emma, I am more sure of this than I have ever been of anything. Marry me and let us build that future together." "Yes," Emma said, laughing and crying at the same time. "Yes, absolutely yes." They sat on that rock for hours, talking about their future, making plans. Pierce had enough saved now, he told her, to buy a small parcel of land about 30 miles from Calico. It was not much, but there was water and grass, and it was enough to start with. They could build a small house, start with a few cattle, grow slowly and steadily. Emma told him about her savings, insisted it should go toward their shared future. Pierce protested at first, but Emma was firm. "We are partners now," she said. "What is mine is yours, and what is yours is mine. We are in this together." They were married 3 weeks later by the pastor of the small church in Calico. Ruth stood up as Emma's witness, gruff and teary-eyed, having given Emma her blessing and a week off for a wedding trip. Mrs. Cooper attended, along with the other lodgers from the boarding house. A few of Pierce's friends from the mine came as well, rough men who cleaned up well and whose congratulations were genuine. Emma wore a simple dress that Ruth had helped her sew, pale blue cotton that she had chosen because Pierce had once mentioned he liked the color. Pierce wore his best clothes, his hair slicked back, his face glowing with happiness. When he said his vows, his voice was strong and clear, and when Emma said hers, she meant every word with her entire heart. They spent their wedding night at the hotel, Pierce having splurged on their nicest room. He was gentle with Emma, patient with her inexperience, making sure she felt cherished and loved. Emma had worried that her body would be a disappointment, but Pierce worshipped every inch of her, told her she was beautiful, made her believe it. The next day they rented a wagon and made the trip out to their land. It was exactly as Pierce had described, a small valley nestled between rocky hills, a creek running through it year-round, grass growing in thick patches. It was wild and undeveloped, but Emma could see the potential. She could picture the house, the barn, the corrals. She could see their future here. They lived in a tent that first month while Pierce worked on building a small cabin. Emma helped where she could, holding boards steady, fetching tools, making meals over an open fire. It was hard work, but it was theirs, and that made all the difference. Pierce had quit his job at the mine, using the last of his savings to buy materials and a small herd of cattle. Emma gave notice at the bakery, though Ruth made her promise to come visit and teach her any new recipes she developed. Mrs. Cooper had hugged her tightly at the boarding house, whispering that she had known Emma and Pierce would end up together. The cabin came together slowly but surely. It was small, just 2 rooms, but it was solidly built and warm. Pierce installed a wood stove that he had bought second-hand, and Emma cried when she first lit it, overwhelmed by the idea that this was her home, truly hers. They fell into the rhythms of ranch life. Pierce worked with the cattle, built fences, hauled water, did the 1,000 tasks that came with trying to establish a working ranch. Emma kept the house, tended a garden, learned to make butter and cheese, cooked meals that filled their small home with delicious smells. At night, they fell into bed exhausted but happy, holding each other close, talking about their day, making love, dreaming about the future. Emma had never been so tired in her life, but she had also never been so content. This was the life she had wanted without knowing she wanted it, the life where she mattered, where her work had purpose, where she was loved for exactly who she was. In February, Emma realized she was pregnant. She told Pierce over dinner, nervous despite knowing he wanted children. His face had transformed with joy, and he had swept her up in his arms, spinning her around despite her protests that she was too heavy, kissing her until they were both breathless. "We are going to have a baby," he kept saying, like he could not quite believe it. "You are going to be a mother. I am going to be a father. Are you happy?" Emma asked, even though she could see that he was. "Happy does not even begin to cover it," Pierce said, his hands gentle on her still flat stomach. "You have given me everything, Emma, a home, a purpose, love, and now a child. I am the luckiest man alive." The pregnancy was not easy. Emma was sick for the first few months, though she tried to hide it from Pierce. When he found out, he insisted she rest more, took over more of the household chores despite his exhaustion from the ranch work. Emma protested, but Pierce was immovable. "You are growing our child," he said firmly. "That is the most important work there is. Everything else can wait." As her belly grew, Emma worried about how her body was changing, becoming even larger. But Pierce seemed to find her more beautiful than ever, his hands constantly on her stomach, talking to their unborn child, telling them how much they were already loved. They made the trip to Calico once a month, so Emma could see the doctor. a young man fresh from medical school in San Francisco who had come west seeking adventure. He pronounced Emma and the baby healthy, gave her advice on diet and rest, and scheduled her to come in when her time drew near. In September, as the desert heat finally began to break, Emma went into labor. Pierce rode like mad for the doctor, then stayed by her side through the long hours, holding her hand, wiping her forehead, encouraging her. When their son finally arrived, squalling and red-faced and perfect, Pierce wept openly. They named him Thomas, after the man who had saved Pierce's life all those years ago. Tom Lawson, born September 23, 1884, weighing 8 pounds and screaming loud enough to be heard in Nevada, or so Pierce joked. Emma had worried she would not know how to be a mother, but instinct took over. She nursed Tom, changed him, rocked him to sleep, marveled at his tiny fingers and toes. Pierce was a devoted father, taking turns walking the floor with Tom when he cried at night, changing diapers without complaint, talking to his son constantly, even though the baby could not possibly understand. "I am telling him about the ranch," Pierce explained when Emma teased him about his one-sided conversations. "Teaching him early what is important: hard work, integrity, love." The years passed in a blur of hard work and deep contentment. The ranch grew slowly but steadily. They added more cattle, built a proper barn, expanded the cabin to include 2 more rooms. Emma's garden flourished, and she began selling vegetables and eggs in Calico, adding to their income. Tom grew into a sturdy little boy with his father's blue eyes and his mother's determination. When he was 3, Emma discovered she was pregnant again. This time she carried a girl, delivered in the spring of 1888 with less drama than Tom's arrival. They named her Sarah, and she was the opposite of her brother, quiet and observant where Tom was loud and energetic. Pierce built furniture for their growing family, taught Tom to ride, taught Sarah to be gentle with the animals. Emma taught both children to read and write, using the same books her mother had taught her from, though with far more patience and encouragement than she had received. They made friends with their neighbors, other ranchers trying to scratch out a living in the harsh California landscape. They helped each other during hard times, celebrated together during good times, created a community where one had not existed before. Emma never saw her original family again. She heard, through the Calico Gossip Network, that they had settled in town for a year before moving on to Arizona, chasing another get-rich-quick scheme. She felt nothing when she heard the news, neither grief nor satisfaction. That part of her life was so far removed from who she was now that it might as well have belonged to a different person. Ruth came to visit twice a year, always bringing some treat from the bakery, always marveling at how the ranch had grown. Mrs. Cooper came less frequently, growing older and more frail, but always welcomed with enthusiasm by the Lawson family. On their 10th wedding anniversary, Pierce took Emma back to the rock where he had first confessed his love. They left the children with a neighbor and rode out in the early morning, arriving as the sun rose over the desert. "You remember?" Pierce asked, standing with his arms around Emma, both of them looking out at the view. "Every moment," Emma said, leaning back against his chest. "I remember being sure you could not possibly mean what you were saying. I remember thinking I was dreaming." "Best decision I ever made," Pierce said, kissing the top of her head. "Turning around that day in the desert. Everything good in my life traces back to that moment." "Everything good in my life traces back to you," Emma said, turning in his arms to face him. "You saved me, Pierce, not just my life but me. You made me believe I was worth saving." "You were always worth saving," Pierce said softly. "I just helped you see it." They stood there for a long time, holding each other, reflecting on the decade they had built together. The ranch was thriving now, more than either of them had dared hope for in those early days. They had 2 beautiful children and were trying for a third. They had friends, a community, a life filled with purpose and love. "What do you think the next 10 years will bring?" Emma asked. Pierce smiled. "I think they will bring more of what we have now. More hard work, more joy, more love, maybe a few more children if we are lucky. More memories to look back on when we are old and gray." "That sounds perfect," Emma said, and she meant it. This life, this man, this family, it was more than she had ever dreamed possible. She was no longer the girl left behind in the desert. She was Emma Lawson, rancher's wife, mother, baker, friend. She was loved and valued and cherished. She mattered, and that made all the difference. The third child arrived the following spring, another boy they named James. He had Emma's dark hair and Pierce's easy smile, and from the moment he arrived, he charmed everyone he met. Tom took his role as oldest brother seriously, teaching James to walk and ride. Sarah became the protective middle child, always making sure James stayed out of trouble. The ranch continued to prosper. They bought more land when a neighboring family moved back east, doubling their grazing area. Pierce hired 2 ranch hands to help with the work, young men who slept in the bunkhouse Pierce built and ate dinner with the family most nights. Emma's skills as a baker had not been forgotten, and she occasionally took special orders for weddings and celebrations in Calico and the surrounding ranches. It gave her something that was entirely hers, separate from her roles as wife and mother, and Pierce encouraged it wholeheartedly. "You are not just my wife or their mother," he told her once when she worried she was neglecting her duties. "You are Emma, a complete person with your own talents and dreams. Never forget that." When Tom was 12, Emma received an unexpected letter. It had been forwarded through several addresses before finding its way to the ranch, and when Emma saw the return address, her hands shook. It was from her mother. Pierce found her sitting at the kitchen table, the unopened letter in front of her, tears streaming down her face. He sent the children outside to do chores, then sat beside her and took her hand. "You do not have to open it," he said gently. "You do not owe them anything." "I know," Emma said, "but I need to know what it says. I need to close that door properly." Pierce nodded and waited while Emma carefully opened the envelope. The letter was short, written in her mother's careful handwriting. Emma read it silently, then passed it to Pierce. The letter was an apology, or an attempt at one. Emma's mother wrote that her father had died the previous year, that her brothers had both married and moved away, that she was alone now and filled with regrets. She said that leaving Emma in the desert was the worst thing she had ever done, that she had been driven by fear and desperation, but that was no excuse. She said she heard through mutual acquaintances that Emma had done well for herself, that she was married with children and a successful ranch. She said she was proud of Emma and sorry she had never told her that when it mattered. She ended by saying she did not expect forgiveness, but wanted Emma to know that she thought of her often and wished things had been different. Pierce set the letter down and looked at Emma. "What do you want to do?" Emma sat with the question for a long time. Part of her wanted to ignore the letter, to let her mother experience the same abandonment Emma had felt, but she was not that person anymore. The frightened, hurt girl her mother had left behind in the desert was gone, transformed by love and hard work and purpose into someone stronger. "I want to write back," Emma said finally. "Not because I forgive her easily or because I want a relationship with her, but because I want her to know that I survived, that I thrived, that her abandonment did not break me. I want her to know that I found something better than I ever would have had if I had stayed with them." Pierce squeezed her hand. "Then that is what you will do." Emma wrote the letter that evening, while Pierce put the children to bed. She wrote about her life, about Pierce turning around to save her, about building the ranch from nothing, about her children and her home and her happiness. She wrote that she accepted her mother's apology, but that she had no interest in rekindling a relationship. She wished her mother well and told her not to write again. Then she signed it, sealed it, and asked Pierce to post it the next time he went to town. "How do you feel?" Pierce asked as they lay in bed that night. "Free," Emma said, surprising herself with the truth of it. "Like I finally closed a chapter that has been hanging open for too long. I am not angry anymore. I am just grateful that things turned out the way they did." Pierce pulled her close, kissing her forehead. "You are an extraordinary woman, Emma Lawson. Have I told you that lately?" "You tell me every day," Emma said, smiling in the darkness, "but I never get tired of hearing it." The years continued to pass, each one bringing its own challenges and triumphs. There was the year of the drought, when they had to haul water from the creek to keep the cattle alive, when the garden withered despite Emma's best efforts, when they wondered if they would lose everything. But they had survived, through hard work and help from neighbors and sheer stubborn determination. There was the year Tom broke his arm falling from a horse, and Emma discovered that terror for your child's safety was unlike any fear she had ever known. Pierce had held her while they waited for the doctor, reminding her that children were resilient, that Tom would be fine. And he had been, wearing his cast like a badge of honor and begging to get back on a horse the moment it was removed. There was the year Sarah turned 15 and suddenly had 3 young ranch hands vying for her attention. Pierce had been ready to run them all off, but Emma had laughed and reminded him that their daughter was smart and level-headed and would make her own choices when she was ready. There was the year James decided he wanted to be a lawyer instead of a rancher, and Pierce had to come to terms with the fact that his youngest son's dreams lay beyond the ranch. Emma had supported James wholeheartedly, proud that they had raised children who felt free to pursue their own paths. Pierce's hair turned gray at the temples, then went fully silver. Emma's body changed with age and childbearing, becoming softer and rounder. But when Pierce looked at her, he still saw the woman he had fallen in love with on a rock overlooking the desert. And when Emma looked at him, she still saw the cowboy who had turned his horse around for her. On their 25th wedding anniversary, their children threw them a party at the ranch. Friends and neighbors came from all over, filling the house and spilling out into the yard. There was food and music and dancing, and Emma found herself passed from partner to partner as old friends and new neighbors took turns spinning her around the makeshift dance floor. But it was Pierce she saved the last dance for, Pierce whose arms she wanted around her as the sun set over the land they had built together. They danced slowly, ignoring the faster tempo of the music, moving to their own rhythm. 25 years, Pierce said, his voice full of wonder. "Feels like both forever and no time at all." "I would do it all again," Emma said, looking up at him. "Every hard moment, every struggle, every triumph. I would choose this life, choose you, every single time. Even the part where you almost died in the desert." Pierce asked, a smile playing at his lips. "Especially that part," Emma said seriously. "Because that is where I met you. That is where my real life began." Pierce kissed her then in front of all their friends and family, a long, sweet kiss that made their children groan good-naturedly and their friends cheer. When they finally pulled apart, both were smiling. "To the next 25, Pierce said, raising his glass. "To forever," Emma corrected. "Because 25 more years will not be enough." They grew old together on that ranch, watching their children grow up and start families of their own. Tom took over the ranch operations, running it with the same combination of hard work and integrity his father had modeled. Sarah married a schoolteacher and moved to Sacramento, but visited often with her own growing family. James became a lawyer as he had dreamed, opening a practice in Los Angeles but making the trip home for every major holiday. Pierce's body wore out before his spirit did. The years of hard physical labor took their toll, his joints stiffening, his movements becoming slower. But he never complained, continuing to work the ranch alongside Tom until the day his heart simply gave out. He died at 68, sitting on the porch he had built 40 years earlier, watching the sunset over the land he loved, Emma's hand in his. Emma grieved deeply, but not hopelessly. She had been blessed with 43 years of marriage to a man who loved her unconditionally, who had seen her worth when she could not see it herself, who had built a life with her that exceeded her wildest dreams. She missed him every day, but she did not regret a single moment. She lived another 8 years after Pierce died, surrounded by children and grandchildren, still baking bread that people came from miles around to buy, still tending her garden, still telling stories about the cowboy who had turned his horse around for a girl left behind in the desert. Emma passed peacefully in her sleep at 76, in the bed she had shared with Pierce for over 4 decades, in the house they had built together with their own hands. Her children buried her next to Pierce on the hill overlooking the ranch, under a simple stone that read Emma Lawson, beloved wife, mother, and friend. She was always worth saving. And on quiet evenings, when the wind blew across the California desert, and the sun set in brilliant oranges and reds, people swore they could see 2 figures on horseback riding across the hills together, a cowboy and his lady, forever bound by the love that had saved them both. Their story became legend in Calico and the surrounding ranches, passed down through generations. It was the story of a woman left behind and a man who turned around. It was the story of second chances and hard work and love that saw beyond the surface. It was the story of 2 people who built something beautiful from nothing but determination and devotion. The ranch remained in the Lawson family for generations, a testament to what Pierce and Emma had created. Their descendants told the story of how it all began, of Emma's walk through the desert and Pierce's decision to help a stranger, of a love that defied expectations and built a legacy. And in the retelling, the story never changed in its essential truth. Sometimes the bravest thing you can do is turn around for someone the world has left behind. Sometimes the greatest love stories begin not with beauty or convenience, but with choice, with someone choosing to see your worth even when you cannot see it yourself. Emma had been left behind by her family, deemed too heavy, too burdensome, too much. But Pierce had seen her not as a burden, but as a person worthy of saving, worthy of love, worthy of the life they would build together. He had turned his horse around, and in doing so, had changed both their lives forever. That was the story their children told and their children's children and all who came after. It was a story of the Wild West, of hardship and survival and the frontier spirit. But more than that, it was a story of love, pure and simple. The kind of love that saves, that transforms, that endures beyond death itself. And on that ranch in California, in the home built by calloused hands and sustained by devoted hearts, the legacy of Emma and Pierce Lawson lived on. A reminder that everyone deserves to be seen, to be valued, to be loved. A reminder that sometimes the most heroic act is simply turning around when everyone else keeps moving forward. A reminder that love, real love, has nothing to do with what the world sees and everything to do with what 2 hearts recognize in each other. That was their story. That was their gift to those who came after. And it was enough.